Alright, so this video I want to talk about the importance of understanding the actual mechanics of something, or really seeing into the nature of what something actually is. And I'm going to talk about this within the context of, say, society and culture, and perhaps how we may look at that and say, oh, that's really messed up, or really asinine, or really absurd, or really immature, or really stupid, or really chaotic, or fill in your blank. And the other context is anxiety and depression, these quote negative emotions that we might feel, which these things aren't actually negative. Perhaps they're actually natural responses to pretty awful situations. And thirdly, how that relates to us on an individual level, and even perhaps how we even show up in relationships, and how we orient and relate ourselves to the world and to other people. And really looking at relationships in general as all relationships kind of being the same relationships, just at varying levels of scale and detail. Because if your fundamental orientation towards understanding yourself and life on a big, large scale, if that orientation, if that basic relationship is based on, oh, I'm a piece of shit, or I'm here on probation, but if I follow the rules, then maybe this person or this thing will give me a pat on the back, or make me feel better, or give me status, or give me some stat power over someone else, or some reward, or some carrot, basically. So a lot of people just say, oh, that's bullshit, man. There ain't no such thing as that. That's stupid. There ain't no proof. Or they say, oh, you just got to believe, man. There's proof for it. Science is proof that God exists and it's all real, and you just got to follow the Bible and give Jesus your heart. It's just the way it is, man. And I use the redneck voice for both sides of the argument, because they're both, say, two sides of the same argument and basically looking at the same thing. They're not actually looking at the understanding the real mechanics of it. Which, if we talk about, let's say, ancient Eastern arts that perhaps have an emphasis on meditation. Well, meditation in a lot of ways doesn't have a fucking anything to do with stillness or emptying your mind, or not thinking, or sedating, or repressing yourself. Yes, at later stages, a person can achieve stillness and can experience these things for sure, but they're not the fucking goal. Like, that's not what you start with. It's like saying, alright, you want to learn to play piano? Alright, here we go. We're going to do Franz Liszt, version of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and that's piano. And it's like, there's no way a beginner can do that. A beginner could barely do chopsticks. But you got to start with chopsticks. And then eventually that chopsticks can lead up to Franz Liszt's interpretation of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. So a lot of what those disciplines and practices are based on is understanding, is insight. Because you talk about mindfulness, you talk about awareness, you talk about listening. Well, that's to actually see what something is, not to be like, I am making a video. I am blinking my eyes. I am holding a pen. I am talking about myself, talking about myself. That's not what it is. That's just that's insanity. That's really stupid and completely just yeah, silly. But perhaps could be useful if you have no inclination. Like if you don't even know where your right hand is in space. But the point of what I'm trying to get is, it's to help us see, to have insight, sight into something, or understanding, to be able to stand under something and say, oh, fuck, that's the actual dynamic, that's actually what it is. So in terms of this way of orientating towards the world that I'm trying to talk about, is the basic script everyone is running is, I have this huge hole in my being, and I need approval, or I need reward or validation from this higher thing. So basically you are willingly subjecting yourself to an open wound for your whole life, of which this larger being or thing that you think will give you something because you were good that's basically setting up your entire life script to mirror that. So your relationships will basically be codependent. You will think that giving your three-fourths of your life away to a corporation in exchange for uh, meal tickets is a great and solid way to live your life. You'll think that like this whole reward infrastructure that we've built up is completely normal and great, but really, it's it's failing to understand that it's really all based on fear and insecurity, and which is how it relates to anxiety and depression. Because where most people start, and rightfully so, is like something's off, something doesn't feel right, this is fucked up, this is broken, this is wrong, whatever. And then I feel angry about it, I feel upset about it, I feel depressed, I feel anxious, I feel all these reactions because something's off. Okay, that's totally makes sense. Like if I punch you in the stomach, it's probably going to hurt. So the natural response to that is to say, not, I don't know, it's fine. Quite enjoy that. That's good. So then usually what happens is the next step is, well, I need medication. Medication means I need a guru, I need a spiritual practice, I need a religion, I need to try harder, I need a pill, I need all these things. I need something to fix me and to heal this hole that I have. And then we have all this new agey nonsense and alternative healing nonsense, which is largely just based in people's imaginations. And what I mean by based in your imaginations, because if you don't understand the actual dynamic or the root of something that is the thing you're trying to work with, then anything you're addressing that's not that is basically just your imagination. Because you're inventing this thing in your head, which is not this. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to do this to this. Okay, well, that's all up here over here. It's nothing to do with what's here that you're actually trying to work with. Which is why most things tend to not really work. And why there's just so... It's kind of why you get lifelong devotees. And then you meet them, and then 30 to 40 years into the game, they're really not much different or much further along than where they started. Because people often think like spirituality and personal growth is just like kind of the way people treat religion. Oh, it's very personal. You know, it's just my very personal, special thing. It's my toy box. It's my little area of the sandbox, and it's just whatever I say and think it is, and that's just my right, and blah, 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 blah. Sure. Fine. In reality, it can actually be extremely potent, transformative, verifiable, measurable, tangible, practical, pragmatic, obvious, easy to discern, undeniable. And for me personally, I would rather do all of those things rather than the first thing that I kind of listed. And really, in a long-winded way that I'm trying to say is basically, if things actually really do change or shift or evolve or grow or heal or whatever, there's usually not a lot of, there's not usually not question about it. It's usually like for sure, yes. And to say that basically if something spiritual or energetic really happens, it will manifest in the body and vice versa in an extremely, in most cases, extremely obvious and easy to discern way. Obvious, obviously, assuming you know how, where, and when to look and how to look and actually have that discernment capacity. And it's actually not just more like psychosomatic anxiety, which is a lot of what shows up. It's like, oh, I was doing Qigong and my left pinky toe felt tingly, and then my right ear got a little bit warmer. So that must mean that I just healed some past life trauma and did all this with my ancestors. And it's like, that's not really what we're trying to say. But anyways, getting off the point a little bit, just wanted to throw in that minor caveat. So getting back to what we're actually talking about is number one, understanding what things actually are and understanding how this basic relationship that we set up with ourselves in the world formats and orients us towards other people, and how that relates to our perhaps negative emotions and the way the world is at large. So basically, if we are oriented to basically having this hole within ourselves, which need for approval, need for pat on the head, need for salvation, then basically our pretty much everything we do will be codependent. We'll be like, please, help me, oh, save me, oh, ah, ooh, oh, ah. And not to say that we'll consciously be that, but at a feeling quality level, at a tonal level, at a body kind of level, that's sort of how it will come across. And then everything we do out of that will basically just reflect that and might produce results, but will kind of be limited. And how this relates particularly to, say, relationships on a small level, or say anxiety and depression, or dealing with more personal things. So, for example, like going to school, growing up, going to school in America. It's easy to be like, all these people are fucking dumbasses. Fuck this whole system. It's all broken. So angry. Blah, 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 blah. These people are idiots. But then you kind of step back and realize, actually, these people are just really, really insecure. Really afraid. Really unstable at a pretty, like, profoundly foundational level. Because otherwise, how would you really, really buy into such an oppressive and dehumanizing way of doing things? So then it's like, wait, what am I? It's just like, how can you really be that? It's like kind of it just changes the tonality a little bit. Like, wait, and then you can really step back and see perhaps even in relationships. There's a really big thing right now. Like if you go to Elephant Journal, people are really loving to write their articles about being codependent. Oh, my life with a narcissist. My life with a sociopath. Oh, my life with a psychopath. All these things. And really this boo-hoo kind of story. These people were so bad and they damaged me and they did this and that, which I completely understand and relate to because I can fill in the blank of my own experiences with all of those things, and I've had, a lot of those kinds of experiences. But also we need to realize that that's our fucking culture. Like, it's not just select rare individuals. Our basic cultural programming is those things from the start. So it's no surprise that people will show up in that way. I mean, being psychotic is basically just, in a really simple mechanical way, is really, really believing in being invested in things that just aren't fucking real. Now you could take it to an extreme and say, oh, my invisible friend over here, I'm going to have a conversation with my invisible friend. Okay, that's pretty egregiously your imagination, unless you're a highly evolved spiritual being and you can, tap into all of the other entities that are around us all the time, which, good for you. But still, within relating to our worldview, that is fucking psychotic, because only what is real is what we can perceive through this extremely limited, extremely dehumanized, extremely anti-everything kind of worldview. But on the other end, if we were to say, oh, well, I'm gonna go to college for 4 years, and I'm gonna get this degree, and then I'm gonna get this job, and then I'm gonna get out, and I'm gonna get money, and then people are gonna like me more, or, you know what, I just don't really like my chin, so I'm gonna go get plastic surgery, and then my chin's gonna be better, and then I'm gonna love myself more, and then people will love me more, and then I'll get more attention, and more sex, and more rewards, and more pleasure, and all these things. That's fucking psychotic. So just as psychotic as being like, oh, my invisible friend over here. Because it's just completely imaginary. No one is going to give a fuck about your chin. other than maybe what value you attach to it and the people at the plastic surgery place because they're taking your money. Well, everyone else is not going to give a fuck about it. Or they might for a few minutes be like, oh wow, good for you. Okay, I validated you, now validate me, please listen. So it's kind of on a larger scale what we're dealing with, but getting back more to my point is we can write these articles and do these things and say these things, but it's like, what hole are we leaving open? Because people think being manipulative or being deceitful or being psychotic or narcissistic or all these things, people really think that that makes you powerful. That gives you some sort of edge over people. And yeah, over completely mindless, awarelessness fucking idiots, you can have power, sure. But what does that really say about you? It's just kind of like saying, look, I'm an adult, but I could totally go over to the preschool and fucking pull one over on these kids. It's like, really, dude? And you're happy about this? Ugh. But really, the reality is it's weak. There's nothing there. There's no power really there, other than what we are willingly subjecting ourselves to, is we're really just doing it to ourselves because of this open wound that we have consciously or unconsciously chosen for ourselves. And that's the dynamic. And once we can actually start to see what that is, and actually see the mechanics, see the functionality in a real way, then I'm not really sure what else we're really doing or what we're really going to change on a individual or a social level. I've had conversations recently with a friend of mine who's talking about, oh, well, my dad's a person with narcissistic sociopath tendencies, and he was really abusive and did this and that. And then my girlfriend did the same, and then I realized my girlfriend was this thing, and then I broke up with her, and I'm like thinking to myself, yeah, but every other thing you say is just reiterating how you're so hungry for their approval. It's like, oh, well, I'm just really trying to be a good daughter. I just really want to be a good daughter. I just, really want to do the family thing. I really want to do this and that. It's like, you're number one trying to get all of this thing from a person who you have defined as being unable, unwilling to give those things. Secondary to that, you are trying to save, fix, repair, mend, control, manipulate this person, which you have also defined as being completely unable, unwilling, and uninterested for doing any of those things. Because the definition of a narcissistic sociopath is they don't give a fuck what you say, think, or do, really. All they care about is themselves. But then you think you're going to get approval or validation or genuine love from them. You think you're going to present something to them in some way that's going to make them be like, oh, you know what? Gosh darn it, you're right. All these years, here I am, just mistaken. But it's like, no, wait, what you are saying the person is predisposes them to being unable to do those things. So who's really the crazy one here? Who's really the abused one? Who's really the psychotic one? It's really quite an interesting proposition. And this basic dynamic, which I'm using from a friend to illustrate something, really reflects society at large in many ways, in terms of religion, economics, education, many other things. And this is our basic orientation of this fucking reality that we are in right now. And yes, we can be like, fuck that, man, we gotta save it, we gotta change it, we gotta fix it, we gotta heal it, we gotta think positive thoughts, we gotta visualize it and vision board it, and we gotta make the world a better place and have heaven on earth and blah blah blah. And it's like, no, that's actually doing the same thing that my friend is doing. You're wanting all of these things because you're psychotically inventing them in your head, but you're wanting them from a thing that you are, number one, already defining as being unable to give them. And number two, it's who's to say it's really even your place, and who's to say it's even their place or its place to do any of those things? Or perhaps it's just another rat race another self-imposed sort of flagellation that you're putting on yourself because you're trying to prove or get or gain something from the world. You want someone to come along and pat you on the head and be like, good job, buddy. You really saved the world. Good for you, or good job. You're really a great martyr. Look how much you've suffered. Look how miserable you are. Look how much you hate your life and people around you. Good job, buddy. Yeah. Here's a trophy. Here's a incremental pay raise. Here's a compliment. And this is the thing is, if we can really zoom out and start to see things more for the dynamics of what's actually going on, I don't know. Is that understanding? Is that insight? Because what is insight? Sight into something. What is understanding? To be able to stand under something, see it for what it is. Just because things, depending on how you look at them, can seem very, very strange. So using the piano analogy earlier, you just hear a piano, you're like, wow, it's fucking crazy. Flip it open, see how it works. You're like, oh, cool, I see how it works. Makes sense. And then you combine that with understanding of music, understanding of tonality and vibration, sounds, and there's things. Like, oh, okay, I get it now. Oh, whatever. Anyways, I think that's pretty much mostly what I had to say on this rather lighthearted and enjoyable, fun subject. But I think it's really important because it affects so many people, like a lot. And this is our basic worldview. If I say our basic worldview is psychotic, what I mean is it tells us that we are a separate individual. Separate from what? It's fucking not true. That there is somehow this external objective world, also kind of not really true. And that there is something called permanence in this world. Also not true. And many other things that we know for sure they're actually completely made up and imaginary. Yeah. Anywho, thanks for watching this video.